2009, I was living in Texas at the time. I was working out at the prison on day shift. It happened to be on lockdown at the time, meaning no one out of cell movement for the offenders. I was working with my partner, having a conversation with them to keep us awake, because if you didn't, you would fall asleep. It was that boring. I was talking to him when I stopped in midsection. What I saw did not frighten me, but surprised me, as I usually did not see any or much activity in the ghost area in the prison. I worked there almost 2 years, and this was the first sighting out of 2 that I had at this prison. I saw a white man walk up to the last cell, dressed in offender's clothes, look over me, and then walk through the prison door. I got up to check on it, thinking no way. All I saw was an offender sleeping on his bed. He was Hispanic. I walked back to the table where my partner was sitting. He asked me what was wrong. At first, I refused to tell him because the last thing I wanted was for him or offenders overhearing it and being ridiculed. Finally, he came out and said he believes in ghosts, that he's seen them before, and then started telling me stories of the other prison he worked at. Keep in mind, most ghosts are seen most active at night, or when there is not much activities going on. I finally had the courage to tell him. Thanks for reading my story. Located in Munnsville, West Virginia, is the old West Virginia State Maximum Security Prison. Now, this prison has a long and sometimes violent history. Prisoners were murdered in their cells by other inmates during riots, and most notably, they were put to death in the electric chair, Old Sparky, who was built by an inmate from that facility. The prison is closed now, but you can still tour it, and if you are brave enough, even spend the night there. Once we had received our initial briefing about the facility, we were allowed to tour it on our own and pretty much go wherever we wanted, even places the public isn't allowed. While touring the facility, I was in a section of the prison known as the Sugar Shack, supposedly where some of the worst offenders were housed. I was the only person in this section of the prison at the time, and while I was up on the 3rd tier, inspecting some of the old cells, when down below me, the cell door slammed shut. Now, this wouldn't have come as much of a surprise to me if it weren't for the fact that all the doors had closed at once, which is what they are supposed to do, but they are controlled by a lever from a central location, which I could see from my vantage point, and no one was there, and the lever was still in the up position. Taking that as a cue, I left that section of the prison and made my way down to the basement in the location of the hole. This was a place they say drove some inmates mad. While in the basement, I kept having the feeling of someone following me, and as I grew near to the hole, a feeling of dread and despair almost overwhelmed me. I kept my senses though, and started to make my way deeper into the basement. I caught the glimpse of a figure, just off in the shadows, moving from right to left, that should have brought them into light. What little there was, but they never appeared, and I didn't see them go the other way. Once again, I took this as a cue to leave. I went from there up to the medical and dental ward of the facility. No physical events took place there, just a sense of foreboding over the area. This all led me to believe that something is still behind the walls of the prison, and that they may never be able to leave. I'm going to do an all-night ghost hunt of the facility, and I plan on taking some video and audio equipment and see if I can capture anything on film or tape. Thanks for reading my experience. My following story is about my visit to the famous Fremantle prison, Western Australia in 2009, when I was around the age of 14. I attended the Torchlight Tour with my best friend and her mother. The Torchlight Tour runs for 1 hour and 30 minutes and is completely in the dark. All you have is a small torch that the tour guides hand out to you. The prison itself was actually pretty old. It was created in the 1850s. Back then, I wasn't very informed of the paranormal, and quite frankly, I was a bit of a skeptic. I had heard that the Fremantle prison was quite haunted and very notorious for sightings of apparitions. I eagerly wanted to experience some kind of ghost for myself to put my skepticism to rest. We toured Fremantle prison because it was my friend's mom's idea. She thought it'd be a little fun outing for us as she liked to keep us entertained and interested. This tour, from what I remember, was around the winter months, so it took place at 6:30 p.m., and being winter, was very dark by then. I had a digital camera, the basic kind, that I had brought along in the hopes to try and capture something out of the ordinary. I'll just note that since this was 5 years ago, I can't remember every single area we were shown, but I have vivid memories of the places I do remember seeing and being in. So if you've ever had a tour and mine seems off as to which areas were entered first, I apologize for my poor memory. I've tried remembering what each area was called, but I'm still unsure and can't be bothered doing tons of reading to research it. We were waiting for the tour group and to be called, as we got there quite early, so my friend and I were sitting on a low rock wall, mucking around just near the entrance to the prison grounds. I remember taking a few silly snaps together and taking random shots of the entrance here and there, reviewing them with my friend to see if we had discovered anything in the photos. Nothing came up, yet. The tour guide yells out for the group to gather and get prepared. He pulls out a large box full of little black torches and says, "These are yours to keep as a souvenir to remember your time here." As each person in the group took a torch, we entered the block. I think it was one of those rooms where they search the convicts, strip them, and give them prison attire to wear. There was a long locker room type bench, big enough for the whole group to sit on. The tour guide told us to find a seat, then proceeded to tell us a little history, what we can expect from the tour, and basic rules. The first room in the building we entered was what I believe to be a kitchen. It had these huge metal type containers, and I don't remember if we were told what they were used for. I took a couple of snaps and followed the group to the next area. I believe the next place we were shown was the courtyard leading to all the other areas of the prison. The tour guide stopped and gave us some more history as I snapped pictures of each section of the courtyard, including a picture of the guide. He then led us to the main cell block, which felt super eerie and cold. Above us was what the prison named the suicide net. As there were numerous cells on different levels, it was popular for inmates to throw themselves off the side and fall to their death. It took 2 years for their government to install the suicide net, so as you could imagine, prisoners were still launching themselves over the railing. As the guide was telling us about the stories, a dummy appeared out of nowhere with a net catching its fall. Most of the group were quite jumpy, as you could imagine. Exploring deeper into the block, the tour guide told us about artwork that the convicts had done on their cell walls. We weren't allowed to take photos of the art with flash on because it can fade the paint. I took pictures of the other cells in the hopes of capturing something paranormal. After we toured the cells, we moved out to another courtyard for where the inmates would go daily to stretch their legs. The next thing we came across was the whipping post in another section outdoor area. The tour guide explained it would be used to punish convicts by whipping them and lashing them, and then covering the convicts with salt. The guide asked for a volunteer, and being the weird child that I was, raised my hand immediately. Giggling like an idiot, I gave my friend the camera and asked her to take photos of me while the tour guide demonstrated the punishment procedure. I remember that I couldn't stop laughing as he was showing the demonstration. In the courtyard, there was a freedom mural that was painted by an inmate. It was beautiful, a sunset behind a beautiful field of lush green grass and tall trees. The tour guide then proceeded to show us death row, to which I snapped a picture before we entered, when an actor wearing prison attire popped out of one of the cells and scared the living poop out of all of us. He then explained the history on death row while each of us briefly popped our heads in the cells before a guide then took us to the gallows. The gallows felt extra eerie. Seeing the rope and the open trap door was super creepy. I took a couple of snaps before the guide stopped us to tell us about the convicts who were hanged. After that, we went to the church. This area felt almost frantic, as if it were full of people. Noting that torchlight tour groups are less than 35 people, even though the church was very spacious. I took a few photos of the cross, then sat down on the bench to rest with my friend and her mom. As we took in the atmosphere, I turned around to take more pictures. We got back to my friend's house rather late. The prison is quite far from where we live, and we're extremely tired. Before we decided to hit the sheets, I thought it'd be a good idea to review all of the pictures I had taken. A few silly pictures of my friend and I, a few of the entrance to the prison, and some rather odd photos. The first odd photo was in the kitchen of the big metal tubs. In between the two tubs were these perfectly round, different color orbs, about 4 or 5, some of them transparent and some of them full. They were all different sizes. The next photo was of our tour guide in the courtyard. Above him looked like what I assumed to be the moon, but with zooming in and inspecting further, it was transparent. It almost was like a creamy color. The photo after that was of a random spot in the courtyard, the creepiest of the entire series. There in that photo stood a man in what looked like a white doctor's coat. You could barely see his facial features, but I could make out that he had glasses. He was completely transparent, and only his head, shoulders, and torso could be seen. He had no legs in the picture, but you can see his long coat hanging freely. Next to him was a large transparent orb that almost had like a green aura around it. The rest of the photos had a substantial amount of orbs. It was crazy. Numerous sizes, colors, and transparency. The most orbs were in the church, floating around the cross. Maybe that's why it felt rather crowded in there. Unfortunately, I deleted these phones off my camera after having them for a few years. I didn't feel the need to have them anymore, but I highly regret it now after thinking about my experience the other day. It would have been great to share the photos with you all, especially the one of the doctor. I apologize if this was a rather long submission, but thank you so much for reading. When I was 9 or 10, my family and I took a ferry to Port Townsend. We walked along the beach and eventually began to explore the town. One of the first places we came to was a courthouse and jail turned museum, a single lady running it. I remember it being empty except for us and the lady. The first floor is the courtroom. Go down a staircase, and that leads to the jail cells downstairs. We looked around for a short while, and then decided to go downstairs. As you were going down the stairs, the cells slowly come into your view. Poised inside the cells were lifelike dummies positioned in various poses. If you don't expect to see them, then you're going to be startled. Once we reached the cells, my mom saw 2 evil-looking spirits inside the cells. One of them was an old lady shackled to the wall, with long shaggly hair, staring at her with an evil expression, a terrible, able grin with no teeth. The second was a man. She said he was very nasty looking. My mom later told me she wanted to bolt up the stairs right up then. My experience there was a lot tamer. My dad walked into the cells to see what it was like. When he wanted me to come in, as I tried to walk towards the cells, it was like there was an invisible shield around the cells, and it was preventing me being close to them. At least that's what it felt like. Needless to say, we went to that museum again. The lady in charge never mentioned any ghosts. Either she never went downstairs, or if she did know, kept it a secret. We didn't come across any ghosts in Port Townsend that I can recall. Thank you for reading. When I was 12, which was last year, I went to work with my mom. She worked at Boulder County Jail until I moved. Now my mom was a nurse at this jail and worked nights, so I went to work with her. Being the adventurous type that I am, I went wandering off. I explored everywhere. I went through every building I could find. It was cool. That night, at exactly midnight, I was looking through the little window on a door that leads to the kitchen in the jail. So as I was looking in there, the big metal spoon to one of the pots started turning. Now with that being creepy enough, the figure of a man started to appear. or at least the outline of him did. From what I could see, he looked like he was maybe in his late 30s or early 40s and was a little bit plump. As I watched the figure turn the spoon to the pot, he looked at me straight in the eye, and then he kind of faded away. I stood peering through that window for a second or two to see if he was going to come back. He never did. A few hours later, at about 2 a.m., I went back to the kitchen to see if he was there again. And he was. But this time, there was another figure in the kitchen with him. This one looked like he was about my age. I stood there amazed for a few minutes. Then both of the figures looked at me, smiled, did what looked like a wave goodbye, and faded. I never saw them again. A few nights after going to work with my mom, I asked her if any of the cooks that worked at the jail had died. She told me this really long story about how he brought his son to work one day, and they both mysteriously died at the jail. She told me the night that I went to the jail with her was the 5-year anniversary for the death of the cook and his son. I never forgot that night, and I don't think I ever will. Hey guys, Phantom of Darkness is here, and I just wanted to let you know, if you really like this channel and you want to subscribe to it and haven't yet, please do so. And remember, if you guys like this video at all, please comment below and let me know what you thought. I really enjoyed making this video, and it was a pretty cool experience for me. So let me know if you guys can comment, like, subscribe, and share, because that really means the world to me, and I really appreciate that. I don't know why I'm asking for permission, but I figure, since you guys are my subscribers, and to the people who haven't known me yet, I'd be polite because I have no other choice, or else I'd be an asshole, and I don't want to be an asshole. So guys, I'm letting you guys know. Good night.